In 1992, the BBC broadcast one of the most controversial shows it would ever have in its entire history, spawning more than 30,000 phone calls in just the space of an hour, along with the first ever reports of children being diagnosed with PTSD from a TV program. This is the story of Ghostwatch. In October of 1988, a horror writer known as Stephen Volk pitched a 6-part supernatural series featuring a young female presenter exploring haunted houses throughout Britain. He wanted to present the final episode in the style of a live broadcast where everything would go horribly wrong and the supernatural would take over. His agent later came back asking if it was possible to condense the 6-part series into a 1-hour special to air on Halloween night. Stephen agreed, but suggested they do it like episode 6 and have it set like a live broadcast, giving the illusion that it was real. Stephen's reasoning was that the scariest or most enjoyable stories he read or saw on screen when he was a kid were tales that presented themselves as if they actually happened. Like Bram Stoker's Dracula. The story is completely fictional, but the book is structured in a way that gives us the impression these events actually happened. After discussing this with his agent, she was excited by the idea, and production for Ghostwatch was finally underway.
On Saturday night, we'll be visiting the most haunted house in Britain, but will the ghosts be there?
Stephen wanted to add even more to the realism of Ghostwatch by getting celebrities everyone in the UK would know playing themselves. He brought in Michael Parkinson as the host, who would be watching the events unfold from the studio. Michael was a well-trusted TV and radio presenter at the time.
Evening and welcome. My very special guest tonight was born Richard Jenkins, son of a miner in South Wales. From the humblest of beginnings, he shaped for himself a career in stage and film and became one of the world's greatest actors, as well as being one of the richest.
The young reporter on the scene investigating the haunted house will be played by children's presenter Sarah Green, whose husband, Mike Smith, apparently read the script too and loved it so much that he asked if he could be in it as well.
We've decided that the corset that Mike has to wear here looks a bit like Snarg off Thundercat.
Which Stephen Volks jumped at the opportunity to have a husband and wife dynamic on the show. He would be taking viewers' phone calls in the studio along with Michael Parkinson. There was also a third performer for the show, Craig Charles, who is currently on the hit UK sitcom Red Dwarf.
Step up to red alert.
Sir, are you absolutely sure? It does mean changing the bulb.
Something like this had never really been attempted before. This was before the internet, before even the Blair Witch Project came out, along with the found footage genre. Reality and fiction had been separated for the most part on TV. You could definitely tell when one show was science fiction and another was a documentary or a news program on real-life events. But over time, that gap between the two slowly started shrinking. Being able to see what was real and fiction were becoming harder. A big example of this would be during 1977, arguably Ghostwatch's biggest inspiration, the Enfield Poltergeist, where a BBC documentary took place in a council house in Brimsdown after a mother of 2 daughters claimed to be experiencing paranormal activity.
What sort of a case is this in your experience?
Well, I think this is probably the best case this century. In fact, as far as documentation is concerned, it may be the best case of all time.
The poltergeist seemed to have latched onto the daughter Janet, having recordings of her speaking with the voice of a man and pictures of her levitating in the air. But throughout the investigation, more things came to light, making the whole thing a lot more questionable. At one point, a camera had supposedly spotted Janet in the kitchen bending spoons and trying to bend an iron bar, along with photos that could suggest she wasn't actually levitating in this picture, but rather jumping. Even some skeptics reminding everyone that Janet was a school sports champion at the time. The idea that this could be real or completely fake was fascinating. It had people engaged and investigating themselves, tuning in and watching the kids' every move during their interviews, seeing if they could spot a mistake that would help them confirm on whether or not the 2 girls were telling the truth. Having that skeptic mind that not everything you see on TV is real was something Stephen Volk was wanting to convey with Ghostwatch, because television was at a transitioning time period at the time, taking certain pieces of the truth and adding elements of fiction, very similar to what we see now with news and media. Trying to explain this to the producers at the BBC, though, became a chore, as there were no known examples available at the time to help explain exactly what they were trying to do. Many of the producers were hesitant with the thought of presenting something fictional as completely real, so they suggested the only way they're going to allow this show to happen is if they take some precautions before it airs. First one being that they add writing credits at the end, along with the BBC announcer mentioning that it's a fictional story before the show begins, along with the BBC Studio Screen 1 intro appearing at the beginning. Within the special, there was also going to be a phone number the audience could call up and talk about their ghost experiences. So the BBC made a pre-recorded answering machine that explained the whole thing was fictional before asking them to go on and tell their paranormal stories. There was also a section added in the Radio Times before the premiere where the creators explained it was a drama piece they created for Halloween. The teasers and promos for the show were also promoted as a drama. The only place where it didn't tell you it was fiction was the episode itself.
Now, on BBC One, Screen 1 presents an unusual and sometimes disturbing film marking Halloween. Over the centuries, there have been countless reports of ghosts and ghouls, but the line between fact and fiction has always been unclear. Using the modern idiom of the outside broadcast, Michael Parkinson, Sarah Green, Mike Smith and Craig Charles star in Ghost Watch.
Tonight's the night. 9:25 p.m. on the 31st of October 1992, Ghostwatch will air in front of 11 million people, one of the highest viewing figures ever for a standalone UK special. However, for the next hour, the BBC estimated around 20 to 30,000 phone calls were all coming in at once, causing the BBC switchboard to be jammed, meaning the pre-recorded message telling viewers it was all fictional no longer played for future callers.
The program you're about to watch is a unique live investigation of the supernatural. It contains material which some viewers may find to be disturbing. I'm joined in the studio by Dr. Lynn Pascoe to give her expert technical advice.
Michael Parkinson introduces us to the show, explaining how they'll be spending the night in a haunted house on the outskirts of London, live. The phone lines are now open and anyone can call in.
We hope to show you for the first time irrefutable proof that ghosts really do exist.
Right, this part of the studio is your part of the studio this evening because this is the phone number we'd like you to call us on.
Visiting the location, the house itself is currently owned by a family of 3, a mother and 2 daughters, who have all witnessed several paranormal experiences while living there, including this piece of footage that was captured earlier in the week, featuring items being thrown around in the children's bedroom. We're introduced to Craig Charles and Sarah Green, who explained to us how all the ghost hunting equipment was going to work, before speaking to the family about their paranormal experiences.
A few days later, these terrible noises woke me coming from the walls, like a thudding.
All around you?
Yes, like the whole room was going to come apart.
What sort of a noise was it?
I said it was pipes, it's central heating. So afterwards, whenever Kim heard something, she'd say, "It's pipes. Pipes is here."
Meanwhile, back at the studio, we get a call from someone who claims they saw something strange during the footage of the girls in the bedroom.
Thank you. Emma, hello.
Oh, hello.
Yeah.
I did have a story, but there's actually something else I'd like to say to Dr. Pascoe. You know, at the beginning, when you showed the real footage of that haunted bedroom, but I was sure I could see a figure standing behind against the wall, just by the curtain.
I've got 8 or 9 phone calls here, which are like Emma Stableford's we had earlier on. They, too, have seen a mysterious dark figure.
Dark, mysterious figure, Doctor.
Have we got that sequence ready yet?
Now, this is the point where Emma Stapleford, our caller, says she could identify that dark, mysterious figure.
Playing the footage back, we can clearly see some kind of figure stood by the curtain while the children sleep. But when the paranormal investigator asks for the footage to be played back again, the mysterious figure is missing, before rewinding it back for a 3rd time to reveal that it may have just been a dressing gown. This isn't the only time we witness a mysterious figure appearing in the background of shots. Throughout the entire special, we see something lurking around, waiting for its moment. At one point during the special, Michael Parkinson and the paranormal investigator began listening to a recorded tape from one of her previous investigations while trying to communicate with ghosts. For a brief shot, we can make out a figure standing right behind her.
Why have you boarded it up like this, though?
All of a sudden, the door stuck. Like somebody was pushing it from outside.
And you were inside by this time?
When I was in there, I swear as God's my witness, I felt this man in there with me.
As the time passes 10 o'clock, Sarah takes the children to bed while Craig interviews several of the neighbours who've heard mysterious goings-on about the house, or they just simply have their own paranormal experiences to share.
Can you tell me about some of the things that have been going on around here?
Well, we live opposite Pam at number 43, and one night, ages ago now, we had all this banging, so we went to the front door, and it was obvious it was coming from Pam's house.
So what did you see?
Well, the top window was smashed, and Pam and Kimmy were in the garden crying.
It's not very funny. I mean, some really weird and horrible things happen around here.
What kind of weird things?
Well, there was that wee girl that went missing. What was
Judy Welland.
Judy Welland.
My youngest son, Gary, came running into the house in a real state, so when I calmed him down, it seemed that they'd been playing in here, and they'd found this dead black Labrador.
And how had it died?
Well, it'd been cut open, like something in a butcher's shop.
Back at the home, we hear a huge banging sound coming from upstairs. One of the girls is missing from their bed. They use the landing cameras to pan around quickly and see the truth.
Hello, kid.
All right, come on. It wasn't me. It doesn't matter.
The story wasn't over yet. While everyone seems to believe the haunting is now an open and shut case, Mike Smith, who's been handling the phone lines, claims there was still reports coming through about the mysterious figure being sighted throughout the special. All from completely different people, but all with the exact same description.
Well, the strange thing is that we're still getting calls about that shadowy figure that was seen in the haunted bedroom. They're generally all saying that it's an old man or a woman, bald with a skull-like head, dark eyes, or some are just saying holes for eyes, and wearing a black robe or a dress which is buttoned up to the neck.
Bald over his head.
Now, do you see what I mean?
It's got a
Kim's
nose
description exactly
in the
matches
middle, it's got a scratch
what Mike's
all
been
the way
getting on the
down.
phones. Wearing a black dress.
It's black.
She says it's black.
Then what are you saying?
Well, we were drawn to assuming it was Suzanne at the centre
Yes.
of this because she's at puberty, but what if she isn't? What if it's Kim?
We've been looking at the wrong person.
Exactly.
As they travel back to the scene, the show begins to derail into madness, following the sound of cats screaming from the basement all the way to technology issues taking place, followed by a caller coming online to explain the real story behind the haunting and who the ghost really was.
I worked as a social worker when he came out of psychiatric hospital. He had several convictions for molestation, aggravated abuse, abduction of minors. He was a very disturbed man, in my opinion. He took his own life. That's why I called. When I was sitting here watching the TV, and did it where he kept his tools, under the stairs. It was 12 days before anybody found him. They heard the cats screaming. The cats were locked in, of course. And of course, 12 days, they got hungry. They got to work on his face.
The footage ends with the studio falling into darkness and Michael Parkinson being fully taken over by the spirit, who's been haunting the whole show as he slowly walks towards the camera while the screen turns to black.
It is, of course, Halloween, and if you were with us for our Ghost Watch earlier, may I reassure you that it was just a story.
We're never meant to fool the audience.
But I also think that you betrayed the trust that the audience has within the BBC.
Well, I thought it was one sick joke, the way that it was based around children. Why did you have to bring the children into it?
In less than 12 hours, every newspaper you could think of in the UK were reporting on Ghostwatch and how so many people were shocked and horrified by what they saw. Many people called into into the BBC expressing their disgust, others saying they were having paranormal experiences while the show was airing. Apparently one woman, according to Stephen himself, called into the studio asking for compensation for a new pair of trousers because her husband soiled himself while watching the show. Another caller was from a vicar who said he knew it wasn't real, but by airing it on TV they somehow summoned real demons. Stephen was also heckled by a woman from his local off-license, expressing her anger about her son being too scared to sleep. The lady serving my local off-license said, "I've got a bone to pick with you. My son wouldn't sleep till we took the luminous skeleton off the back of his bedroom door," to which I thought, what is he doing with a luminous skeleton on the back of his door in the first place? Despite having many comical responses to this show, one of the worst things to come from all of this was the tragic death of a young boy known as Martin Denham. Aged 18. He had a mental age of 13 and was a slow learner, but 5 days after watching the program, he took his own life with a suicide note saying, "If there are ghosts, then I will be with you always as a ghost." Martin's home had faulty pipes, which made the same banging noises as described in the original program. This, of course, fueled the ammunition of the already angry mob, causing the BBC to backtrack and pull all mentions of Ghostwatch from the general public. Allegedly, Ghostwatch was nominated for a BAFTA that very year, but the BBC made efforts to have it removed and never mentioned. The Radio Times was also ordered by the BBC to never mention it again. Stephen would later work on future paranormal shows for the BBC, but not once would Ghostwatch ever be brought up during those productions. It only got worse for the BBC, as a report came out 2 years later mentioning Ghostwatch and how some children had been diagnosed with PTSD from that very show, making it the very first program to have reports causing something like that. This looked like the end of Ghostwatch, ready to disappear into the abyss, never to be mentioned again. For nearly a decade, the BBC pretended like the show didn't exist. That is, until the internet forums introduced themselves. A fan base for the show began to appear online. People claiming they watched the show as a kid, and while they were still traumatized, they weren't angry at the show for scaring or giving the illusion that it was real. In fact, they loved it for that very reason. Some even inspired by it, causing them to venture into the film industry as a job once they were old enough, or their favorite genre in movies became horror. Suddenly, a completely different side of the audience was coming to the surface. On its 10-year anniversary, the BBC finally acknowledged its existence and announced a DVD release, along with an essay written up by Stephen Volks himself, published by the Fortean Times, explaining his personal side of the story. In spite of the vitriolic reaction in some quarters, over the past 10 years, Ghostwatch has created a loyal fanbase who got it and loved it. Apparently pirate videos were available on the black market for £50, and I've been told by university professors that almost every year, at least one student in media studies will want to do their dissertation on Ghostwatch. Ghostwatch is a fascinating case study into how easily people can be trusting in media and television. Stephen himself said in his essay about Ghostwatch that he wanted the show to be a message on modern TV and what it's becoming. How that line between reality and fiction is becoming more and more blurred. A documentary's main focus is about telling an interesting story, and facts are just a bonus if you even have them. News outlets are more focused on what makes a good headline rather than the context of the story. Shows like Ghostwatch, The Blair Witch Project, Marble Hornets are a certain type of media a lot of people watch when they were young, and just like the Enfield Haunting, they were looking at the screen intentatively, trying to figure out if it was real or fiction. I think that's a healthy thing to experience at some point in your life, learning that not everything you see is true. To this day, the BBC have never aired Ghostwatch again. It can be found on the Internet Archives, which is where it remains. Thank you